Hey, Steve Reed here. I want to share a story with you, something that happened over this past weekend. So I was talking to this guy and we were discussing business and personal projects and things. And this individual wanted to wanted to create their own graphic novel. And they had some ideas and some of these little characters that he was kind of putting together. And he was talking about how he could potentially bring this thing into reality. And so I actually wrote my own. I think it's to call it a graphic novel is maybe a little bit of a hyperbole, but it was probably 600 frames of this story that I wrote and illustrated over the course of about 2 years that I just did for fun. It's not the best writing. It's not the best illustration. It overall is pretty lame in a lot of places. I just kind of wrote it as I was going along. So I was making up the whole story as I went. It was just for fun. But then I took that, and this was way back in 2004. I took it back when Flash was a big deal, and I created my own animation studio, and I started producing animated episodes of this graphic novel that I wrote. But it all of that, and then it kind of rolled into me doing animation for other businesses, and it got pretty big. Some of my work made it into Wired magazine and was even featured in a story about it on MSNBC at one point. And so that was a whole fun chapter of my life where I was doing those things. But it all started with just making the story to begin with, just taking a passion project and just simply doing it. And so this guy was kind of asking me a little bit about where he got started in wanting to publish a graphic novel. I've also published a children's book as well, self-published. Again, I wrote my own children's book for one of my daughters for her birthday, kind of starring her. And it's called Light in the Closet. And she discovers this portal in her closet that goes to this alien world. And she's just kind of stumbling around where there are clearly very dangerous aliens and things all around her. And so it's about her finding her way back. Kind of a weird children's book, but it's very colorful, really intense colors, and was, again, a really fun project. But I got that printed. And so I did have some background from dealing with these things to kind of give this guy a little bit of advice. I'd also had a successful Kickstarter project. And so there were many different things that I've done involving print and projects and things. And those three in particular, I think, were pretty helpful to this guy. But here's the main deal. He didn't really know where to go with it. And he had just been drawing for the last 3 years. And so he had grown up with comics. We talked about our personal love for Calvin and Hobbes and Bill Watterson. He was a huge fan of Garfield, some of these guys as well. And he wanted to do something similar along the vein of kind of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And he's wanted to write this book for a younger audience. And I've got several younger kids, and I've seen the types of these books that they get that are almost like, I don't know what you would call them. I guess they're graphic, not really a novel, I guess, but they're almost graphic novel type stories for little kids where they're illustrated, but then they tell this story. And so I don't know technically what they're called for that age group, but he's wanting to do something similar. So I was kind of familiar with that. But we had a really great conversation, and I was just kind of giving him some tips and really, really encouraging this guy, and asking him, was he wanting to do this as just a hobby, or does he want to actually sell these things and do this for a living? And he expressed an interest that, yeah, if there was a way he could create these stories and do these things for a living, he would like to do that. And so I was asking about what he's doing now. And right now he's just trying to perfect his characters. And he showed me some on his phone. And he lived in Japan for a while. He spoke Japanese, American guy. I saw a lot of Japanese influence in some of these very simple, basic characters. They almost reminded me of almost like a Pokemon type character. Some were more human, some were more animal. But he had kind of a good eye for creating a massive variety of unique characters. And he said he had a lot of stories that he had written, some longer, some shorter. So one of the bit of advice I gave him is I said, where do these things live right now? Are they just on your phone? He goes, well, I've taken pictures on my phone and they're in my sketchbooks. And some of these characters were drawn on lined paper. So they weren't even drawn in like an actual sketchbook. It was almost on notebook paper, it looked like. And so what I told him is I said, well, here's the deal. You have a huge opportunity right now. I showed her my daughter's Instagram where she does all of these really phenomenal illustrations. She was doing really well in doing drawing by hand on sketchbooks, but I told her you're going to need to probably advance to digital if you want to be successful with this. And she was doing amazing color work with these markers and producing content in a very short period of time that was just really phenomenal. She had outpaced me in many ways in doing what she was doing, especially with color and drawing and doing her character design. And so basically I worked out a deal with her where she took out a loan from me to get an iPad Pro with Procreate. And so she's been doing that, and she's been launching this amazing advancement of her own artwork. And it's been amazing to see her grow. And she's amassing a huge amount of followers. She noticed that one particular type of content was doing better than the others. So she's actually split off to another Instagram account to where she's posting about that. And it's going really well. She's getting a lot of commissions, actually. People are wanting to hire her to do different types of things, design characters for stories they're writing, do portraits and things for gifts. So she's doing really well with that. She's only 16 years old. And so it's pretty amazing to see what's happening. So I was showing this guy my daughter's Instagram account, and I was like, look at where she began right here, and look where she is now. You could see her work improving. But not only that, she's responding to what other people are saying. She's finding out what people are liking. She's understanding the different types of markets that are out there that she could potentially leverage to her own advantage. And so he explained to me that he said, now what you're describing to me is different than what I've heard from other people. He says, other people say you should just do your art and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Right? And he goes, what you're telling me, I should be listening to people and designing things for them. And so I thought that was a really great question and a great observation, because when you're talking about art and graphic design and advertising and just creating stories, you do have different reasons why people create art. Some people create art because it's a hobby, and other people create art because it's a business. And when you're doing a hobby, you're usually wanting to do something that makes you happy. The stuff you're doing is for you. And every now and then, people have hobbies that other people are very interested in. And they can just do what they're doing day by day, and people are thrilled by it and they love it. And we see tons of examples of that within social media where someone's just doing their thing, and it's amazing and fun to watch. They have a super unique hobby or a talent or a skill that is loved by many, many people. But not everybody's talents are loved by everyone. And that's where you get a bunch of starving artists. That's one facet of a starving artist, is they want people to love what they do, but they're doing something that people simply don't love. And so they demand that people love their thing that they like. It's almost like you're eating a type of weird food that only you like, and you're demanding everyone else should like it too. It's not realistic. But on the other hand, there are other people that create content for an audience. They know an audience likes a specific thing, and they create content for it. Now, they may hate creating that content. They may go, man, I'm so tired of this, but people like it. It brings in some money. It's a business, and so I do it anyway. And then somewhere in between there, you have the person that finds an audience and does something that they love, that the audience loves too, and then there's love on both sides. Then you're doing something you love for somebody who loves what you're doing. So that's what I talked to him about. I said, you don't necessarily have to abandon all of your principles, abandon all of the things that you love and care about. You just want to find a way to look out there, see what people like, and see if there's something that they like that you like too, where you can meet in the middle and provide content. So I said, you need to get those drawings off your phone and put them out there into the world. I say, start an Instagram account. You may want to grab yourself an iPad Pro with Procreate and utilize. I was showing him this one guy on Instagram that I follow who does really great illustration work. And, Procreate has these brushes that you can set to actually smooth out the lines as you draw them. Because I noticed he had good structure to what he was drawing, but the lines were a little shaky. And I said, hand-drawn stuff, unless you're a master and you're scanning everything in and cleaning, even like the cleanest stuff is not going to be as clean as something digitally created. And I said, for what you're doing, I would spend my time focusing more on perfecting my craft than creating an ultra steady hand. And so when in art, you use what tools you have. And if the tools are hindering your creative process, then get better tools. Get something, whatever tools allow your creativity to flow the most freely are going to be the best tools for you. If your creativity is being stifled by the awkwardness of the tools that you have or the ineffectiveness of the tools that you have, then I don't think you're making the best choice. I mean, I made the jump to digital like 20 years ago and never looked back. I still do hand drawing. Like I got a bunch of sketchbooks all around me in my backpack, in my shelves. I got several of them and I love them. And I still do hand drawn stuff, but that's for me. That's my own hobby. I draw all kinds of stuff. I draw weird people and aliens and robots and whatever, just all kinds of stuff. It allows me to be a kid again and be imaginative and create. And there's a certain thing that you experience when you're holding a notebook and see the art with your own eyes. As soon as you take pictures of it and upload it, it loses that magic, I feel. But if you create something digitally, I feel like you can view it on a screen, and it's because it lives in the digital world. It doesn't live in the physical world. And so you can appreciate it as a digital piece of art. But taking analog art, putting it into the digital world doesn't always work. It's like looking at famous paintings, doing an image search and then looking and seeing the real painting. I've been to New York and I've seen some of Monet's artwork in person. And I mean, there's just subtleties to the artwork that you do not get in a simple digital picture. So yeah, there's that aspect of the hand-drawnness, the digitalness, and the fact that art is art. And if he's wanting to be successful, to be able to produce content rapidly and to grow quicker, going the digital route with what he's doing, I felt like was probably a good move for him, because his drawings were a very basic style. And it didn't look like he had really developed anything beyond just creating the characters. And so if he learns how to draw them better and then hires a digital painter to come in and do the backgrounds and the color, he could advance quicker like that. So I said, you just need to get this stuff out there. See what characters people like, see what characters people don't like, and start kind of getting feedback and a following and communicate with this audience, build this audience, and then take some of these stories you have and start producing. I've seen people do almost like in the old fashioned newspaper comic strip format. They'll do a 4-panel comic strip, and each screen that you see in Instagram is one panel of the comic, and then you swipe and you go 2, 3, 4, and then there's all 4 panels at the end. And I said, people are keeping that kind of panel-based comic strip art form alive on Instagram. I've seen it out there and it's pretty cool. And so you could take some of your short stories and your jokes and your things like that and use your characters and start developing that. And then by the time, a couple years down the road, you've got a massive following. You've found out what people like, the story you want to create. And then you can announce a Kickstarter to all of your followers and say, hey, do you guys want to fund this graphic novel I'm producing for kids? It's got these characters in it, all these ones that people love. Here's some snippets of what it's going to look like. Then you build the Kickstarter, you get funding, and you bring your idea into reality. And then you kind of go from there. And there's all kinds of outlets, like Blurb and Lulu, where you could self-publish and then set those things up to publish through Amazon, and to where you can set those things to publish through Amazon and even Barnes & Noble and some of these other platforms. And who knows, if it's really popular, it may get picked up by a big publisher who will take it and market it and fund the production of even more books. And we're talking about, that's how the movie or I guess eventually the movie, but the book The Martian started out. He was telling me about how it started out as a single like $1.99 or something purchase, and then it got picked up by a publisher into the novel, the audiobook, and then eventually the movie. And he's like, that guy's probably sitting pretty right now. I was like, yeah, probably, man. So you never know what's going to happen, but you can pretty much guarantee that nothing's going to happen if you just sit there with stuff on your phone and you don't do something about it. So get out there and make the thing happen. Put it out into the world, even if it's messy, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not polished and everything. Just start throwing stuff out there. Put things into the world where there's a chance that they can grow and become something. And so this is what we do in software development and everything. You have an MVP. I was explaining the concept of an MVP, a minimum viable product. You put something out into the world and you start getting feedback from people as quickly as possible, because that's going to tell you if your idea is good or not. If it just exists on paper for years and years and doesn't move, and you're waiting until you can produce this big giant thing and then launch it all at once, you could spend all of that time creating a massive failure. So why not spend a little bit of time creating a tiny failure? That was the other thing we discussed too, is failure, and how failure is not something to be feared. The only thing I really fear is quitting, is me just giving up on something and quitting because I think it's hard. I don't like to quit things. I like to push them until they fail and then understand why they failed, and then take that understanding and roll it into the next idea. My first Kickstarter was a failure. My first Kickstarter was a set of these cards that I created, and I had 3 different sets. There was a 1 10-pack of one topic, 1 10-pack of another topic, and a 20-pack that had both. And in that first Kickstarter, the way I'd priced it out, I priced out producing these 3 different packs. And it did cost a lot more money to produce the 3 different packs, because each one had a different cover and there were all these other expenses involved. And so when that first one failed, I noticed that I had fallen very short of my goal. And so I took what I learned from that and I produced another Kickstarter. I went and redid the numbers. I eliminated the other 2 options and just had one option, a 20-pack, one single option. And by doing that, I eliminated a lot of the costs of production. The price dropped. I pushed that one out there. And guess what? Nailed it. It wasn't a huge Kickstarter, but it was a fun project. I had a victory. Maybe been a small victory, but it was still a victory. I had that under my belt. I did something. I failed. I learned from it. I pivoted. I did something else. I succeeded. And you know what? I made back all of my money on the project and more. I probably tripled my investment on that little project. So yeah, it was totally worth it. And so like I told this guy, same thing I kind of put out there to whoever's listening. If you have an idea or a concept, find a way to create your own MVP, a minimum viable product. What is the very least you can do to put something out there? Even if it's just as simple as sharing your thoughts and ideas on Instagram, or creating a blog, or finding some other way of putting yourself out there, putting your idea out there, and making it happen. There was one guy who did he wanted to develop some software for that would be almost like a virtual assistant. But before he developed any software, he goes, I got to test and see if people would even want to use something like this. So he hired somebody very cheap, to act as the software and to automatically email people. And he got like 15, 20 people that he knew and said, hey, I'm wanting to develop this thing. Would you be interested in something like this to help you become more efficient? So he put a plan together and they said, yeah, I'll test that. I'll see how it goes. And so he got these people signed up in his little experiment, and he had a human being doing the things that software would do by emailing people updates and doing all of the things that he imagined that the software would do, or at least the core things, the core important things, the reasons why you would use that. And the feedback he got was very, very good. Everybody loved it. They said it saved them time. It took a lot of headache away from them. He got all this feedback from it to the point where he felt like, okay, I can build this software and I've got some actual data showing that people would use this and it would help them. And so he went forth and decided to produce that software. So there's tons of stories like this out there, and you see people doing it everywhere. But I think everybody gets this idea in their head that everybody else somehow has found some magical secret to be able to produce complete finished versions of all of these things. But what they don't see are the years, maybe years and years before that, where they were struggling and working and putting little ideas out there and all that process. And then finally, boom, it explodes upon the scene. And they think that just all happened overnight, or that they had to work and put all of that together and build all of it and then launch all of it at the same time. And a lot of things, they just don't happen like that. Go look around, but keep your eyes open. Look at people who are being scrappy and are just doing the very bare minimum just to get something out there. You'll notice it. Once you realize that's what's going on, you'll see a lot of people producing a lot of pretty lame stuff, to be honest. But you know what? They're producing stuff. Even if it's lame, they're doing something about it. They're not just sitting there dreaming. They're actually putting things out into the world. And that's what creates the possibility of a real game changer. So don't sit around and wait to do something. Get out there and do it. And that's the message for this podcast. So, hey, we'll talk to you again later. Go out there and create something great.